Breaking news now. Police have identified the man who they say shot and killed 8 children in Shreveport, Louisiana today. His name is Shamar Elkins. Authorities are calling this a result of domestic violence. The shooting happened at 6 this morning. The victims range in age from 1 to 14 years old.
8 children, 1 house, 1 Sunday morning that shattered an entire city forever. Before the sun had fully risen over Shreveport, Louisiana, something unspeakable had already happened. And the details that investigators uncovered when they walked through that front door on West 79th Street, those details have left an entire community struggling to breathe. If you follow true crime, breaking news, or stories that expose the darkest corners of domestic violence in America, you are exactly where you need to be right now. Hit that subscribe button because we cover every major breaking case as it develops, and this one is unlike anything Shreveport has ever seen. Before we go any further, drop your state or country in the comments right now. I want to know where my true crime family is watching from today. Because what happened in Louisiana is a reminder that this kind of tragedy does not stay local. It spreads, it shocks, and it demands answers. Let's start where this story truly begins, not with the gunshots, but with a phone call. Imagine being on top of a roof. Dawn is barely breaking, the air is still, and somewhere below you, inside the house you just escaped, a man with a gun is making decisions that no human being should ever make. You are clinging to the edge of a rooftop, and you are calling 911, and you are trying to describe what you just witnessed. That is exactly where this story starts. At approximately 5:55 inches the morning on a Sunday, Shreveport police received that first distress call. The caller was not inside the home. The caller had fled to the roof, and what they described to dispatchers set off one of the most intense and tragic police responses this city has seen in modern history. A male had been shot. The suspect was still inside, and the suspect had a name, Shamar Elkins. Now here is where true crime investigators always have to slow down and ask the question that most people skip right past. Who was Shamar Elkins really? Not just a name on a police report, not just a headline, but who was this man? What was his connection to this home? And what chain of events led to a Sunday morning where 8 children would never wake up again? Stay with me, because the timeline of this case is not what you expect. Within 3 minutes of that first 911 call, a second call came in, then a third. Dispatchers were receiving overlapping information, cross-referencing addresses, trying to build a picture of what was happening in real time. And one detail from those early calls stopped. Investigators cold. Approximately 9 children lived inside that home on West 79th Street. 9 children in one residence on a Sunday morning. And Shamar Elkins, the caller told police, had shot everyone inside. Now I need you to pause and really absorb what those words mean to the dispatcher on the other end of that call. Everyone inside, in a home with 9 children. This is the kind of transmission that changes the energy in an entire police department. Units were mobilized. Fire departments were staged nearby. Every available resource in Shreveport was suddenly pointed at one address. But here's the first twist in this case. And true crime followers, you know that the first twist is rarely the last. While officers were racing toward West 79th Street, a completely separate 911 call came in from Harrison Street. A different location, a different victim, but the same suspect. The woman on the Harrison Street call told dispatchers something that added an entirely new layer of horror to an already devastating morning. Her boyfriend had shot her, and then he had taken her 3 children and fled. Her boyfriend, Shamar Elkins. Think about what investigators are now dealing with. 2 active crime scenes, multiple victims across multiple locations, a fleeing suspect who is armed, who has already shot people, and who may have children in the vehicle with him. This is not a standard domestic violence call anymore. This has escalated into something that entire task forces are built to handle, and it is happening in real time, before the city has even had its morning coffee. At 6:10 a.m., dispatchers made the critical link. Harrison Street and West 79th Street were connected. Same suspect, and the clock was ticking. Here is what I need you to think about as a true crime viewer, and I genuinely want your opinion in the comments on this. When we look at cases involving domestic violence that escalate to mass casualty events, the warning signs almost always exist before the final explosion. So the question this case forces us to ask is not just what happened on that Sunday morning, but what happened in the days, weeks, and months before it that nobody saw, or that somebody saw and said nothing about. That question does not have a comfortable answer, and it is one that the leaders of Shreveport are now demanding be addressed directly. By 6:15 a.m., police had confirmed that Shamar Elkins had carjacked a red Kia Sportage near the West 79th Street location. He was moving, he was armed, and there were potentially 3 young children somewhere in that vehicle. 2 minutes later, at 6:17 a.m., a traffic unit on routine patrol, not even part of the active pursuit yet, spotted that red Kia Sportage. Southbound, Interstate 49, moving fast. This is the kind of detail that sends chills through anyone who understands how these pursuits unfold. One officer, on random patrol, spots the vehicle. In a different universe, that officer takes a different route, pulls over for coffee, gets called to a minor accident. In this universe, they see a red Kia Sportage, and they call it in. Within minutes, units confirmed the vehicle was crossing the Red River Bridge into Bossier City. And then came the update that made every officer on that radio frequency hold their breath. The children taken from Harrison Street might be inside that car. Let me give you the geography here because it matters enormously to how this pursuit unfolded. Shreveport and Bossier City sit on opposite sides of the Red River in northwestern Louisiana. The moment that vehicle crossed that bridge, this became a multi-jurisdictional, high-speed, high-stakes pursuit involving the lives of children who had already survived watching their mother get shot that morning. True crime community, I need you to imagine being one of those children. You are young, you are frightened, you have just witnessed something no child should ever see, and now you are in a moving vehicle with the person responsible. The officers tracking the Kia were balancing 2 competing emergencies simultaneously apprehend a dangerous suspect and do not do anything that puts those children in greater danger. That is an impossible calculation to make in real time. At 6:23, the vehicle was spotted near the Swan Lake area. 2 minutes later, officers located the injured victims from the Harrison Street shooting the mother who had been shot and left behind. She was alive, she had survived, but her children were still out there. At 6:29 a.m., officers made contact with Shamar Elkins. That contact involved an exchange of gunfire. By 6:30, the confrontation was confirmed in the 400 block of Brompton Lane in Bossier City. And then came the detail that no parent, no officer, no dispatcher wanted to hear next. 6:40 a.m., officers searched the suspect vehicle. It was empty. No children were located inside. So where were they? This is the question that hung over Shreveport like a storm cloud through those next agonizing minutes. 3 children, taken from their mother at gunpoint during a domestic shooting, last seen potentially in a vehicle that was now empty at a shooting scene in Bossier City. If you are watching this and you feel your heart rate rising right now, that is because you understand something that true crime viewers understand deeply. The moments after the suspect is down are not always the moments of relief. Sometimes they're the beginning of a second investigation entirely. Tell me in the comments, do you follow cases like this for the criminal investigation angle, the domestic violence awareness angle, or both? Because this case operates on every single level simultaneously. At 6:43 a.m., officers cleared the residence on West 79th Street. What they found inside that home has been described by officials in terms that made seasoned law enforcement professionals visibly emotional at the press conference that followed. 8 children, deceased, inside the home. 1 child survived. 1 out of 9 children in that house on a Sunday morning in Shreveport, Louisiana, 1 survived. The Shreveport Police Department, the Bossier City Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, and local leadership all converged on what had rapidly become one of the deadliest domestic violence incidents in Louisiana history. And at 7:03 a.m., just over an hour after that first 911 call came in, Shamar Elkins was pronounced deceased at the scene on Brompton Lane. Here is where this story shifts from timeline reconstruction into something deeper. Something that true crime audiences who care about the real impact of these cases need to sit with. The officials who spoke publicly in the hours after this shooting were not just giving press conference talking points. They were visibly broken. One official described being brought to his knees, not figuratively, but literally, by what investigators found that morning. Another, who grew up in the Cedar Grove neighborhood near the crime scene, said simply, I get it. But here is the detail that law enforcement leaders kept returning to, and this is the detail I want every single person watching this video to carry with them long after you close this tab. Over 30% of murders in the city of Shreveport are connected to domestic violence. 30%. And in the wake of what happened on West 79th Street, that number already staggering more than doubled in a single morning because of one act of domestic violence that escalated beyond anything the community had seen before. The question that investigators, community leaders, and now true crime followers across the country are asking is the same question that comes up in every case like this. Not just the who and the what, but the why it was allowed to get this far. Domestic violence cases rarely explode without warning. The explosion is almost always preceded by a pattern escalating behavior, reported incidents, missed interventions, moments where the system had an opportunity to act and, for whatever reason, did not. We do not yet have the full picture of what warning signs, if any, existed in the days and weeks before this Sunday morning. But what officials made clear is that this tragedy did not just claim the lives of 8 children. It exposed something systemic, a gap in how communities respond or fail to respond to domestic violence before it reaches the point of no return. One leader said it plainly: domestic violence is not a private issue. It is not a family issue. It is a community issue. And when communities treat it as anything less than a public health emergency, people die. Now I want to shift the perspective because the best true crime coverage does not just zoom in on the event. It zooms out to show you the context that makes the event possible. Shreveport, Louisiana sits in Caddo Parish in the northwestern corner of the state. It is a city with a complicated history, genuine community pride, and real struggles with violent crime that its leaders do not shy away from acknowledging publicly. The neighborhoods referenced in this case, Cedar Grove, Allendale, Cooper Road, are neighborhoods where people are born, raised, build families, and where they also sometimes become the victims or perpetrators of the cycles of violence that have plagued American cities for generations. When a local official stands at a microphone and says he grew up in Cedar Grove and says, "I get it," that is not a political statement. That is a man who understands that the children who died in that house could have been children he grew up next to. And that is the kind of context that transforms a breaking news story into something that demands more than shock. It demands action. The Louisiana State Police Investigative Division was deployed to the Bossier City address to investigate the officer-involved shooting that ended this incident. That investigation is ongoing. The full picture of what Shamar Elkins did and why, and what his complete history looked like, will emerge over time through official channels and investigative reporting. What we know right now is this: he began that morning at one location, where he shot a woman he was in a relationship with and abducted her children. He then traveled to a second location, a home housing 9 children, and opened fire. He fled, carjacked a vehicle, led police on a pursuit across the Red River, and died in a confrontation with law enforcement approximately 1 hour and 8 minutes after the first 911 call was received. 8 children lost their lives. 1 survived. The mothers and family members connected to both locations are now living in a version of the world that did not exist before 5:55 on a Sunday morning. And a city is demanding to know how it never gets to this point again. True crime community, here is where I want to bring you into the conversation, and I mean this sincerely, not just as a YouTube engagement tactic. Cases involving children as victims in domestic violence escalation events are among the most difficult cases to discuss without falling into one of 2 traps. The first trap is pure sensationalism, treating the details as content without treating the victims as human beings. The second trap is sanitizing the story so completely that the urgency disappears and nothing changes. The goal here is to walk the line between both, to give you the full picture, the real details, and the human context. Because understanding how these cases unfold is the first step toward understanding how to interrupt them before they reach this outcome. So I am asking you directly in the comments, what do you think needs to change? Is it law enforcement response protocols, community mental health access, domestic violence intervention programs, or something else entirely? I want to read every single response because your perspective on this matters. Let me walk you through what investigators and officials have described as the sequence of failures that this case represents, not failures of individual officers, who by every available account responded with speed and professionalism, but structural failures that communities across America are wrestling with right now. The first failure is intervention timing. By the time a domestic violence situation escalates to the point where someone is making 911 calls from a rooftop, the opportunity for early intervention has long passed. The warning signs, the escalating threats, the controlling behavior, the previous incidents, those are the moments where intervention saves lives. And those moments are invisible to law enforcement until someone reports them, and invisible to reporters until after a tragedy forces the story into public view. The second failure is resource access. Officials in Shreveport made an urgent call following this incident, not just for police resources, but for mental health resources, for domestic violence support, infrastructure, for a coordinated community-wide response system. The fact that this call had to be made in the immediate aftermath of 8 children dying tells you something important about the state of those resources before this Sunday morning. The third failure is cultural. Domestic violence is still treated in too many communities, regardless of race, income level, or geography, as something that happens inside a family and stays inside a family. It is still, in too many cases, something that neighbors hear and do not report, that family members witness and minimize, that potential victims stay silent about out of fear, shame, or the very real threat of retaliation. Until that cultural reality changes, officials said plainly, we will keep standing at press conference podiums delivering news that breaks our own hearts. One surviving child. I want to return to that detail because it is easy, in a story with this many devastating facts, to move past the details that deserve the most weight. One child, in a home where a gunman opened fire on 9, survived. That child's path forward, the trauma, the grief, the process of trying to build a life after witnessing something that no adult should witness, let alone a child, that path will require more resources, more compassion, and more sustained community support than any single press conference can promise. And the 3 children taken from the Harrison Street location, taken by their mother's shooter, in the chaos of that morning, they too survived. They were separated from their mother during one of the most terrifying hours imaginable. Their reunification, their healing, their futures, these are the stories that will unfold quietly, away from cameras, in the weeks and months that follow. True crime stories do not end when the suspect is pronounced deceased. They continue in the lives of everyone left standing. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with, and it is not a comfortable one, but the best true crime coverage does not traffic in comfort. It traffics in truth. Shamar Elkins is gone. The investigation into his actions that morning will conclude. Reports will be filed. Numbers will be updated in crime databases. The homicide rate in Shreveport will carry the weight of that Sunday morning in its statistics for years. But the 8 children who died on West 79th Street, they are not statistics. They are not a data point in a domestic violence study. They were children who had names and personalities and futures that we will never know about because of what happened before 7 a.m. on a Sunday in Louisiana. And if this video does anything beyond inform you, if it makes you think about a situation in your own life or community where something felt wrong and you stayed silent, if it makes you pick up a phone or knock on a door or share a resource or have a hard conversation, then the only right response to a story this devastating is to let it move you towards something other than passive shock. The cycle of violence that officials described in Shreveport is not a Shreveport problem. It is an everywhere problem. And the only thing that interrupts it is people, regular people, deciding that domestic violence is their problem to solve too. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this video if you believe more people need to understand what happened in Louisiana and why it matters far beyond Louisiana's borders. And if you are new here, subscribe, because we cover every breaking case with the depth and the human context that these stories deserve. Stay safe, look out for each other, and we will talk again soon.